Around the world, millions of young people, like myself, live with a disability.
Shots of young persons with disabilities from around the world.
But despite having the same dreams and ambitions as people without disabilities, we face discrimination, stigma, and prejudice. Disability is often ignored when policies are built and programs designed. Many barriers continue to limit young persons with disabilities' access to education, employment, and healthcare. Violence against young persons with disabilities is widespread. Realizing their sexual and reproductive health and rights is often out of reach for young persons with disabilities. Answering the call of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development to ensure equal rights for persons with disabilities, and with the support of Spain, UNFPA has commissioned this global study on ending gender-based violence, or GBV, against young persons with disabilities, and ensuring they realize their sexual and reproductive health and rights, or SRHR.
Ending gender-based violence against young persons with disabilities.
Young persons with disabilities are almost 4 times more likely to be victims of abuse than their peers without disabilities, and nearly 3 times more likely to be sexually abused. Girls and young women with disabilities are at particular risk. Prejudice against persons with disabilities on the part of the perpetrators is one cause of this, as well as the notion that young persons with disabilities are easy targets. For this reason, young persons with intellectual disabilities are at greater risk. Most countries now have legislation that recognizes gender equality and addresses GBV, but unfortunately, discriminatory laws and policies remain in some places. State action is essential to make sure that young persons with disabilities are protected from gender discrimination and GBV by law. To deal with gender-based violence against young persons with disabilities, we need to focus on both prevention and responses. Promising strategies include guaranteeing that young persons with disabilities understand their rights and can access legal systems, ensuring effective implementation of laws and policies, including prosecuting perpetrators. Those programs should include services that address gender-based violence and that are tailored to the needs of women and young people with disabilities, including health services, safe accommodations, counseling, and other services. In addition, we need to ensure service providers, including healthcare providers, are prepared, trained, and resourced to work with young people with disabilities. Partnering with civil society organizations that represent young persons with disabilities when developing policies. And raising awareness of the rights of young persons with disabilities both in government and within the community.
Realizing sexual and reproductive health and rights for persons with disabilities.
Young persons with disabilities have the same interests with regard to sexuality, relationships, and identity as their peers, but less access to the means to realize this. Young persons with disabilities are seen as not needing information about sex, while young women and girls with disabilities are often denied the right to make decisions for themselves about their reproductive and sexual health. This lack of comprehensive sexuality education puts young people at risk of poor sexual and reproductive outcomes. They are denied empowerment related to these issues. We need to ensure that young persons with disabilities have access to integrated sexual and reproductive health services and have the ability to make informed decisions about their life options, including through family planning and contraceptive services, comprehensive sexuality education, STI prevention and treatment, as well as other services. Throughout all of this, partnering with civil society organizations is of enormous importance. Raising awareness of the rights of young persons with disabilities is also critical, as is ensuring that the sexual and reproductive health and rights-related laws, policies, and budgets are inclusive of persons with disabilities.
Principal recommendations.
The study makes 3 principal recommendations. Young persons with disabilities must decide. Young persons with disabilities themselves are key to understanding the issues and developing new responses to those issues. They are the most important partners that we have, and states and civil society organizations should engage them so that they can be involved in the decision-making process. Equality in policy and practice. Equality for young people with disabilities in access to SRHR and in prevention and response to GBV must both be formal and substantive. Clearly, states should get rid of discriminatory laws, but they also have to make sure that related policies and programs don't leave persons with disabilities behind when they are implemented. There has to be real equality in both policy and practice. End stigma and discrimination. Ending stigma and discrimination against young persons with disabilities is critical to their full inclusion. In addition to these 3 key points, there are a handful of further recommendations that UNFPA outlines in the full study, which can be found on the UNFPA website. To support these recommendations, UNFPA and Women Enabled International are also publishing guidelines on providing rights-based and gender-responsive services to address GBV and SRHR for women and young people with disabilities. The guidelines are meant to provide practical and concrete actions governments, service providers, and other relevant stakeholders can take to meet the needs of women and young persons with disabilities. The Global Study on Ending Gender-Based Violence and Realizing Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights aims to assist all partners in building a comprehensive program in this field. To read the full summary, please go to www.unfpa.org. Thanks for watching.
UNFPA, Spanish Agency for International Development and Cooperation.